of diversity and inclusion, I'm going to present in English. When I was young, I was fearless. I was the young girl who believed that I could do anything. I had wild dreams, imaginary friends, and I was not afraid to voice my opinion. Wherever you're sitting, Mom, you know that I'm speaking the truth. And when I grew older, I got used to hearing that I was bossy, and that girls should be pretty and polite, and that I shouldn't be so loud and outspoken, and that I should let my brother, 4 years younger than me, encouraged to be bold and brave, try first. I happened to love computers, and before we had a computer at home, I used to stay late at school to attend computer class, and I was the only girl in class, and I remember the boys would get around the computer and they would tell me to back off. And one day, a boy in class brought a Guinness World Records book to school. And I remember how all the boys stood around, and then they pointed at me and they said, "Look, boys are better at everything. Tell us one thing girls are better at." I was only 10 at the time, but I remember that I believed them, and I remember that I thought it sucked to be a girl. Fast forward, many years later, I was at business school and I was watching a series of presentations by Norwegian CEOs, mostly men. Suddenly, a woman walks up, and I'll admit that I thought that there had been a mistake. But no, this woman was a high-standing, successful, ambitious CEO. She was the best at what she did, and she had a killer pair of shoes. And for some reason, that became a turning point, because I thought that, well, if she can, we can. So then and there, I took a stance to regain my confidence, have my voice heard, and make a positive impact on the world, just like any kick-ass girl should feel encouraged to do. A few years later, I was working for VG, and I was a summer intern covering cultural news. And one Friday afternoon, I was just about to press publish on an article when I heard a huge bang. Our windows shattered, and I remember complete silence, followed by our editor screaming, "Everyone, grab your cameras, grab your computers, run." I grabbed my colleague's hand, and we ran 8 floors down, through thick smoke, screaming alarms, shattered glass, into streets where we saw bleeding bodies and heard a distant police voice scream, "Run, get away." This was July 22nd, 2011. And until that point, I'd been writing about fashion, celebrities, self-tanning creams. Suddenly, I found myself writing obituaries for my sister's friends. That summer was a nightmare for all of us. It brought tremendous grief, it brought community, and it changed a lot of perspectives. And as a journalist, I remember thinking how important the internet was during a time of crisis. I received hundreds of emails telling me that they knew what had happened, but Norwegian media put their life, their personal life, on hold 24/7 to provide the world with fact-based news. This was around the time when VG became digital, and not many years earlier, you'd have to wait 24 hours in order to know what was happening. And there is nothing worse than not knowing in a time of chaos. That summer made me realize both the power of media and technology. And in some weird way, that pushed me to follow my dream and move to New York and pursue a master's in media management. Studying technology and media made me realize how incredibly fast and fundamentally technology is changing our society. But it also made me realize another thing. There are hardly any women in this industry. Now, the first job I had after graduating, I was working for a media tech startup, and one day my boss said, "I'm going to promote you to CNO, Chief Note-Taking Officer." Here I was, eager to learn about technology, super passionate, and here he was, decreasing me to the best note-taker in the office. Comments like these were normal, and they provoked me, because I knew that technology as we knew it was absolutely going to change the world and create a future beyond our imagination. And I wanted to be part of that But more importantly, I wanted all the other amazing girls and women to be part of that as well. I wanted girls to grab the CEO and the CTO titles, not to nod politely when they were asked to get coffee and to take notes. And a few things needed to change. How many here are guilty of saying, oh, but I'm not technical, I don't know how to turn on the TV, or asking for the tech guy when the AV fucks up? Oh God, sorry, my language. Well, I was one of them. But when I thought about it, I got really mad, because passion for technology is not about turning the TV on or getting iCloud to work. It's not even really about the nodes or algorithms. Passion for technology is about the tremendous opportunities technology provides us as individuals to make a positive difference on the world. Technology has democratized fundamental building blocks in society, such as education, communication, information. And through the internet, and perhaps especially through social media, we've been empowered as individuals everywhere to make an impact with our voice, just like we've seen with movements like Me Too. In healthcare, we're seeing huge advances with gene sequencing and modifying with CRISPR. AI is helping us with everything from disease diagnosis to crop optimization. Robots and exoskeletons are helping the disabled back to mobility. VR is helping people deal with trauma and psychological disorders. And this is just a slight sliver of examples of how we're seeing technology create a better and more inclusive world. So when I moved back to Oslo, I started Tenk together with Camilla. We had no plan, but we definitely had this mission. And this mission was to invite girls and women of all ages to join us on a learning journey, to learn as much as possible and to be part of this magical thing, creating our future. And 3 years later, Tenk has grown to 3,000 members, and we have spoken to thousands and thousands of girls and women about why they should lean in and come and join us in the technology world. We've also established a technology camp in the end of August, and I truly urge you all to sign your daughters up if they're between 13 and 18. In the end of August, they get to code, they get to hack, they get to build their own rocket ships. It's so fantastic. Last year, a girl said, it's just so wonderful to finally be able to shape the future with my own hands as opposed to just talking about it. I'm a 13-year-old feminist. I am girl power. Every girl should feel this way. Together with Oda and IKT Norge and a bunch of other amazing partners, we have for 3 years in a row organized Girl Tech Fest, where we invite 400 girls in middle school in Oslo to Deichmanske to code. But I'll show you a small video of last year.
Er det morsomt med teknologi? Gleder dere til å kode i dag?
Ja.
Er det morsomt med teknologi?
Ja.
Hvorfor er det morsomt med teknologi?
Fordi vi er flinkere. Man får noe kjensere for flinkere fordi vi er flinkere. Men vi er det, og jeg tror at dette er et veldig fint vi kan bevise det. Ja.
Så bra!
Houston, Texas, baby. This goes out to all my girls up in the club, rocking the latest. Who will buy it for themselves and get more money later? I think I need a bummer. None of these people can fight me. I'm so good with this. I remind you, I'm so good with this. Boy, I'm just playing. Baby, hope you still like me if you pay me. My persuasion can move the nation.
Oi, så kult! Har dere det morsomt på Girl Tech Fest?
Ja.
Er det gøy å bare være jentene?
Ja.
Hvor er gutta i dag da?
De er hjemme på skole.
Who run the world? Who run the world? Who run the world? Who run this?
In 2016, I won the opportunity of a lifetime. I was granted a scholarship to attend Singularity University at NASA Research Center in Silicon Valley. And for 3 months, 12 hours a day, I got to learn everything there was about exponential technologies, and I was inspired to see how you could use these to solve our greatest challenges. Needless to say, I was surrounded by incredibly smart people, and I was super nervous, and I was affected by something that we call the imposter syndrome, where I was constantly in fear that someone would like see me blow my cover and say that, hey, you don't belong here. And it didn't exactly help that on my very first day, the Uber driver on my way into NASA, he turns his head to me and he says, so honey, are you on your way in to entertain the astronauts for tonight? And I remember I murmured in the back, no, but I sure hope they will entertain me. Comments like these are part of women's lives. They're not particularly grave. They can even be considered funny, but aggregated over time, they do affect how women perceive ourselves. For example, I'm a public speaker about technology, and last year, after being on stage with a colleague, he said to me, you know, the only reason anyone listens to you is because you're cute. And he laughed, so I did. But the comment actually made me so insecure that I said no to my next job. And just a few weeks ago, I was in an executive meeting with a media house, and we were discussing a possible TV show that I would be included in. And towards the end of the meeting, the boss gets up and he looks down at his phone and he says, you know, I've been quite skeptical of you. I know you have some substance now, but in the beginning, I was pretty sure you would make us look laughable. And then and there, I just nodded and said, sure, yeah, I can understand that. Because in some ways, I could, which is not okay. But anyways, when I got home and I started thinking and I remembered all the other kind of comments like this that I'd gotten, I realized that this guy knows about my experience, he knows about my passion, he knows what I do, yet he just doesn't consider me capable. And this experience is not unique. Some of you have had them, but most of you have had them without even realizing it. These comments are a result of unconscious stereotypes and unconscious bias and gender stereotypes, and they do limit women in society. So while men are often made to believe that they don't have enough, they don't have a big enough apartment, a good enough job, a nice enough car, women are made to believe that they themselves are not enough. Not smart enough, not pretty enough, not skinny enough, simply enough. And these tendencies are hard to identify, and they're awkward to address. And for the average white male, it's hard to understand that these seemingly innocent comments can be frustrating because they do symbolize a deeply ingrained systematic difference in how we perceive women and men. And it's not that they necessarily mean to, it's just because they don't understand, because they haven't spent their lives constantly having to prove themselves. Privilege is invisible to those who have it. Even in a country like Norway, who ranks high on gender equality, these attitudes still shape our society. And they're prevalent in the private sector, where Norway actually performs worse in terms of women in leadership compared to countries like Rwanda, Nicaragua, and Jamaica. Our 7.5% female CEOs still rank about 3% over the US, where there are more CEOs called John and David than there are women. Chew on that. In other words, the world's leaders does not represent the world it's attempting to lead. And this is not okay. My amazing co-founder, Maria Sunde, she went to the UN in 2015, and she heard Emma Watson's opening speech for the He for She campaign, where she said, if not us, who? And if not now, when? Every generation has a mission to fulfill or betray, and ours is achieving gender equality. And this led us to start She's Got This, or Hun Spanderer, because our suspicion is that gender stereotypes and unconscious bias deeply ingrained in our society is the reason leadership still looks the same way today as it has for centuries. And for the past few years, we've worked hard nationally and internationally to bust the myth about why there are so few women in leadership. We've done it with humor, and we've done it without pointing fingers. Because our belief is that we actually need to include the other half of the population in this conversation if we want to achieve real change. I want to show you a video from our last campaign.
Jeg har aldri bestemt meg for å bli karrieremann.
Det har jeg egentlig aldri bestemt meg for.
Den tanken har egentlig aldri slått for meg. Jeg vil egentlig si jeg ikke er det heller. Jeg har vært utrolig heldig og funnet en jobb som jeg trives godt med.
Jeg skulle ønske jeg hadde hatt et godt svar på det spørsmålet, men jeg føler egentlig bare at jeg havnet her.
Det husker jeg ikke. Jeg har alltid vært opptatt av å ha det gøy på jobben. Når jeg bestemte meg for å bli karrierekvinne, et veldig rart spørsmål, det vil du aldri ha stilt til en mann.
Tusen takk, Rune. Du er helt fantastisk. Du er stor del av dette. The myths around why there are so few women in leadership have been repeated so many times that eventually we just start accepting them as objective truths. For example, the myth that women don't want to. They just choose differently. Well, according to McKinsey, 80% of young associates, regardless of their gender, have ambitions to reach very top leadership. But we only see 20% of women that get there. And it's also important to remember that both women and men find it hard to combine leadership roles with family. And according to McKinsey, it's 5.5 times more likely that women will take all the responsibility for housework. And research also shows that when men have children, we consider them more responsible. But when women have children, we think that they're less dedicated to their career. And at the same time, we know that the more responsibility a person has outside of work, the less responsibility they want at work. So the myth that women simply don't want to or choose differently is wrong. The truth is that when women have entered the workforce, equality at home remains to be seen. And unless you're Elon Musk, you can't be CEO everywhere. And another myth is that women don't excel as leaders because they're not assertive enough. And I'm sure you've all heard the advice, toughen up, speak up, tell them. I know plenty of women who do just this. And it's not fair to put the responsibility on women alone to change the game. Because when women do communicate in a direct way, it often contradicts the gender stereotype of how we think a woman should communicate, and we like her less. I'm currently co-writing a book on this topic, and I recently interviewed the same female CEO that inspired me at business school so many years earlier. And she's definitely assertive, but she told me about this episode from the early stages in her career, where she heard from a colleague that she'd been labeled an ice queen, and she found it incredibly hurtful. And she spent many subsequent years and lots of energy trying to overcompensate for this image. Being super nice, acting like a work mom, sugarcoating everything so that everyone would like her. First, she was definitely a good leader, but often what we consider good leadership qualities are reverse correlated with what we think that women should have of qualities. First of all, we need to reevaluate what we consider good leadership qualities, but enough. Second of all, we have to stop thinking about people as primarily defined by their gender. So a guy at a conference the other week, he raised his hand and he asked me, since women are more compassionate and empathetic than men, should I treat my female CEO differently knowing this? First of all, I admire this man so much for his question, because that means that a conversation has started and we can start to bridge the gap. But my answer to his question is something that I hope everyone here, including myself, will take into consideration more often. We need to meet people for who they are and not what gender they belong to. Just like you're different to the woman that you're sitting next to, President Obama is different than President Trump. Gender is not what primarily defines us. Of course, we should be proud to be a woman, I definitely am, or a man, or whatever gender or not gender you identify with, but I believe that increased gender equality will actually make it okay to be proud to be ourselves, to be different, not treated or shaped by gender stereotypes or society's expectations. So in short, treat your female boss with the exact same respect as you would if she was a man, but don't make assumptions that she can't handle constructive criticism that would make her better in her job just because she's a woman. Many people are going to tell you that the current gender divide is nothing but a lag from the past and that it's destined to close with time, but that's not the truth. In 2017, the yearly World Economic Forum report actually said that gender equality worsened for the first time in 10 years. They adjusted the time that it would take for us to achieve gender parity from 170 to 217 years. Even if I continue to live in Norway, I have to become 198 years old to be paid the same as a man. But I want to tell you that knowing all that I do, I am very confident that we can change this, but it's a patient process and it's a collective one. Women and men together. from all the CEOs I've been interviewing for this book, they all have one common takeaway, and that is women help each other, and men help women. Because it's not a cake where more opportunities for her means less for you. In the end, we all win. The women behind me are a few of the women who have played a tremendous role in my life through their support or their vision. They pay it forward every single day, and they are true role models when it comes to building other women, and we should all strive to do this. The other thing that I want to tell you is that even though the numbers aren't budging, we are. Last March, Google reported that global interest in the search term gender equality actually reached an all-time historic high. And it's not just women who are searching. 40% of searches for women's rights issues and 60% of searches for Me Too actually came from men. Every year, the Webster Dictionary declares a word of the year based on increased interest compared to the last years. And last year, they actually declared that word feminism. But I want to show you the video. I get such a good mood when I see that. So besides search, what do we do? Well, there's been tons of research on the problem. There's been very little research on the solution. And while it's important to acknowledge the fact that there is a problem, I think it's time to stop asking why and start asking how. And that's why our company, She's Got This, is currently bridging the gap between research institutions and corporations to try to find some of the world's first validated solutions on how to actually increase gender balance. But in the past few years of working on this, we have seen that there are definitely two things that you need to do in order to increase gender balance. The first is that it starts in leadership. In our work with She's Got This, that has been our #1 priority, encouraging senior leadership to both communicate the importance of diversity, but also prioritize diversity throughout their organizations, such as we've seen with these beautiful men on stage here, these smart men. Sorry. Goes both ways. So for leaders in here, know you cannot do it alone, but know that it does start with you. And the other thing is data. What gets measured gets managed. If you don't count it, it doesn't count. A scary majority of companies lack this kind of gender data today. And that's why we're currently developing a tech platform that's going to gather the most important data points to give a comprehensive view of the what and the how and the why to increase gender balance. In a world that's increasingly global, technological, driven by algorithms using sometimes biased historical data, diversity is truly essential to avoid reinforcing our biases, flawed decision-making, and worse tendencies overall. Because faults due to lack of diversity have been happening for decades. Before the 1970s, you couldn't actually wear makeup if you were black. This is a result of a very narrow-minded product design team ignorantly excluding huge segments of the market. Makeup was created for and by pale skin tones and made dark skin appear gray. The very first airbags killed women and kids. The product team consisted of men who used their own weight and height chart and completely ignored the consequence that the impact would have on smaller bodies. This is a complete catastrophic failure. It's an utter abdication of responsibility. Everywhere you look in the world, products have in some way or form failed to meet the needs of women and minorities in varying degrees of seriousness. And if I were to point to something in here, I want to point to the speaker mic, who I assume was designed for the typical speaker who, let's face it, is often a man. I mean, I can't wear my earrings because it's going to disrupt the sound. The thing here is hanging around my head because my head is too small. And the battery is making my bra fall off because I'm sure it was made for people who have pockets and skirts don't. Thank you. Everywhere you look in the world, leaders are scrambling to find the next technological solution to survive the next technological revolution. And as an alumni, and now faculty at Singularity University, I am very well versed in the fact that we already have the technology to solve humanity's global grand challenges, but that is also why I know that technology is nothing without the people developing it or setting the vision for where it should go. The world's problems don't exist because there's a lack of technology. They were created by people, and they have to be solved by people, perhaps augmented with technology. And people are not just white men. Our world is going to look fundamentally different in 10 years. But in order to create the solutions we need, we have to make sure that everyone is represented so that Tech for Society actually includes and responds to society's needs as a whole. And looking out at an audience with 1,500 kick-ass women in tech, I'm pretty sure we're headed the right way. So here are my final words. Diversity is essential to not only survive, but thrive in the future. Help and support each other because it's not a zero-sum game. Raise confident young girls who feel encouraged and inspired to become kick-ass women. Thank you.